Yeah, to infinity and beyond. It is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. You Works. Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, Ben Berry here at Rivers Casino, live and in the flesh. Noah, August is gone. September is gone. October is here, just melting away. Like the fall is just getting eaten up. Halloween will be here before you know it. How about it?
Yeah, real noticeable shift in the seasons. And
beautiful day today, though. Beautiful day.
Nice day today, but prepared for some chillier weather. And yeah, definitely feels like basketball season. Obviously for the city of Philadelphia, it's very much, red October, but no, it's about that time, and interesting to get a better sense of what the 23-24 Sixers might be. So yeah, a lot of adjusting, and everyone sort of getting their feet under them during this time of transition. Yeah, it's
still a little bit of the great unknown with the 76ers team of what to expect, how it's all going to transpire, and we haven't even seen Joel Embiid and James Harden on the floor yet in this preseason. Although Nick Nurse did joke that he has expectations that everyone will be available for Game 3 of the preseason, which is Monday in Brooklyn. And he said, but I wouldn't put any money on it, though. So he backtracked, kind of covered his bases there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like many coaches, Nick Nurse has some cagey tendencies. So Tim DeBontemps from ESPN, phrased the question like, is it a fair expectation that you will have everyone active for that game? And he thought about it a while and ultimately said, yeah, it is, but added that significant caveat. It does sound like nothing is concerning legitimately for the Sixers in terms of the physical health situation. Daniel House was a late scratch with knee soreness, but I heard from him today, seems minor, and like he'll be pretty good to go moving forward. So that is a plus, that at least thus far there are no real injuries of note, but obviously everyone would feel better, I think, if you're a Sixers fan, just actually seeing Joel Embiid out there. And then, of course, James Harden and his status remains the great unknown. By all accounts, he's still taking part fully in each of their practices, and we saw him today doing his thing as far as putting up jumpers with Tyrese Maxey and seeming to be in a good mood and, completely engaged. But on the court, there is nothing of note from James Harden yet as far as the 2023-24 Sixers are concerned.
Yeah, since our last podcast, we've had 2 games. We just had a practice here today as we're preparing for another game Monday, as I mentioned. But before we get to the games and what we saw from the team that was out there, it would be remiss if we didn't mention that this James Harden thing is lingering, but he has pretty much been a model citizen, just not really upsetting the apple cart. There hasn't been any, subtext or any underlying undertones of anything as far as I've seen. You're there every day with the team. Do you agree with that, or it's kind of been quiet on the Western Front, so to speak?
I agree with that. Yeah, I would say he's not 100% a normal member of the team, and we'd all be pretending if we saw it that way, but does seem like he's scrimmaging in the practices, and he's not like holding back or giving half-hearted effort. And good for him. And as we've said, certainly he has incentives to do all of that.
Two sides to this, double-edged sword.
Yeah, but many wouldn't approach it the same way. And thus far, it seems like he's valuing professionalism, at least in the practice setting. And I think also, regardless of what's next, makes sense for him that his next game, he wants to be in really good shape and sharp and showing the best version of himself. But yeah, we were walking the gym today, and he was actually chatting briefly with Elton Brand, the Sixers general manager, and then started running through his post-practice routine, putting up a bunch of jumpers with Tyrese Maxey. And it does not feel typical. It does not feel like last season by any means, but I think both Harden and the Sixers have done a decent job of like simulating a normal environment, given all the external factors that make this a strange situation. They've tried to proceed kind of business as usual, and seems like they've been pretty good at thus far.
But we have not heard from him yet, and there is a reasonable expectation that when he does take the floor, hopefully it will be Monday with the team, that he will have to speak afterward, right?
If and when he plays, that is a usual obligation.
Right.
Certainly, if a player is requested and played in a game, they would be contractually obligated to speak. But as we've talked about, there are many potential loopholes. There are many nuances of how media availability and what is required works. But yeah, if James Harden plays, that would very obviously be newsworthy. And I think the reasonable hope and expectation would be that he'd say some words to us, and that we'd get to hear from him on Monday. So that is a little subplot possibly bubbling in the near future.
And I'm going to just speculate that you were going to go up to Brooklyn anyway, but the potential of Harden and Embiid both being out there gives that even more incentive to you to make the trip up.
Yeah, I mean, look, as we've discussed before, like, you don't want to act like preseason games are the biggest deal in the world. Sixers had a 4-0 preseason last year, started the regular season 0-3. But yeah, like, especially with a new coach, it's really intriguing to see how they install Nurse's system and learn some of the ins and outs of that. And then the fact that there is this rather odd sideshow in James Harden and continued uncertainty with him, I think definitely makes that one where I'm glad that, we'll have the in-person coverage coming up on Monday.
All that said, if Harden will not be there, there is a golden ticket in one number 21, Tyrese Maxey, waiting in the wings.
Number 0, right? 21.
Joel Embiid.
Trying to remember
21.
the number. Yeah, Joel Embiid 21. James is 1, and Maxey's the big fat 0. But yeah,
number 0 and Tyrese Maxey waiting in the wings. We saw him look fantastic in the first preseason game. There were other players were playing well too. Peyton Pritchard was looking good out there, but Maxey just kind of shines in a way that maybe other players don't. And you've noticed, some of the, new players here, Kelly Oubre specifically, picking up on that, just being around him and playing with him and being on the floor with him. But he was the same way last preseason, kind of to be expected a little bit. He's kind of given us this bar for him to meet, and we're hoping he continues to take even more strides past that. But just want to give some shine and opportunity to remark on just how good he's looked here in the preseason, these first 2 games.
Agreed. Yeah, no, he was awesome. The first one in Boston took little time to reach his 24 points. I think he had 19 at halftime. And yeah, eerily similar in a good way to the last preseason. And it was very interesting after the game last night. Nick Nurse mentioned that he wants Maxey hitting that 20-shot mark every single game, and that he cares about that specific number and trying to push him to be aggressive in that way. And, I asked Maxey about
20 shots. Any player would love to hear that.
That's what he said, basically. Like, just a coach having that confidence in you and your teammates, feeling the same way.
We're going to be better if you shoot the ball 20 times.
And he said, like, it empowers me to sort of, feel like I can be myself. And I think he also had, a characteristically mature perspective of, yes, I know I need to push myself to be aggressive and get into the paint, but that's not going to be exclusively scoring. Like, I care about getting the guys who do all the dirty work, open shots with the kickouts, and just being a lead ball handler who's, well-rounded and, an improving facilitator and, a leader of this team at the young age of 22. So definitely a very, very green light for Maxey under Nurse.
Greenest of lights.
Yeah. And he's, continuing to think about how he can make progress with weaponizing his speed and, capitalizing on those moments where he does get into the paint. Both as a scorer and as a passer, and early signs, definitely a positive for Maxey. And yeah, no surprise that he has hit the ground running under Nurse here.
Yeah, you said no surprise, unless get not be so like caught off guard or surprised by those comments, because this is something he's well earned and shown such progress. Navigating the tough love era with Doc Rivers and coming up through that time as a rookie and where he is now and on the precipice of this extension he's going to get eventually. This is well earned opportunity for him. And buoyed by the fact of who he is as a person, which was corroborated by Kelly Oubre yesterday. Like, man, listen, he says after the game, him and Maxey doing the joint presser, like, I haven't played next to many guys like this guy who is just so jovial and upbeat and sans negativity. And I'm sure you were in the room when that happened. Can you shed a little bit more light on that? Just, there's an on the court and off the court, and Maxey seems to be a master of both.
Yeah, no, I think the description of lighthearted was, on point from Kelly Oubre, and the description as well of Maxey as Speedy Gonzalez, I thought was, colorful and apt as well. But Kelly Oubre Jr. did mention, he obviously played with a great ball handler in Charlotte, a great passer in LaMelo Ball, but
he played in Golden State too. Like he's been around the league,
Absolutely, but he loves just the borderline unparalleled speed that Maxey brings to the table. And yes, like scoring is still his best quality, but Oubre can clearly sense that this is like a selfless person who values winning above all, and just wants to be great for his teammates both on and off the court. And I think the NBA can be a grind, and it can wear you down, and especially if you're like in an internal competition and trying to fight for minutes, you can get frustrated when you have an off night here or there. And just having Maxey around you, that energy is going to consistently be really positive. And Kelly Oubre Jr. is already a fan of the Maxey vibes, in Philly.
And I think he has to get in line because there are a whole lot of people here who enjoy Tyrese Maxey. And it was good to see Kate Scott and Ala Abdelnaby walking around the arena and being in the office yesterday after a long offseason, a big offseason for Kate, obviously, really active with the World Cup stuff as well as the Seattle Seahawks preseason stuff and whatnot. So props to her for her awesomeness and being very down to earth, as I'm sure many of you know or have seen. With that said, we got Tyrese Maxey, out of the way, but I think if we line up all the players that have played and that have been on the court, I want to skip way down the line and go to Danny Green, bro. Danny Green. I mean, much love to him. I'm an older guy, oldest guy in this room, and he's definitely old in NBA years. But coming off the injury, showing some wherewithal, being in shape, looking healthy, shooting the basketball. Why do you think his contract is non-guaranteed, and do you think it will be guaranteed because of the way he's played? Yeah,
as we talked about, there's just the reality of he came into this season as a 36-year-old with
a little question mark,
a grand total of 9 games under his belt last year, and he is a player whose success will hinge largely on does he make or miss jumpers. I think all of the little wise veteran qualities still have some value, but if we're being honest, got to make jumpers when he's in the game. He's got to fire them up, and the early indications are positive. Did not have a great shooting night in Boston, but then boom, instant impact last night. I think he had 8 points in the final 3 minutes and change of the first quarter, a couple steals. He even made this amazing long-range diagonal pass for an Oubre 3, made a step-back jumper. I think he's a player who's never doubted himself and has developed a very keen sense of who he is and how he can help NBA teams. And
sounds like a veteran to me.
Sounds like but I mean, I think not all veterans have that capacity to adapt.
Embracing their role.
Well, adapt quite as well. And even if, they do embrace their role in a general sense, it's understanding exactly what needs to change for you and how maybe, against this specific player, you could play them tightly 5 years ago. Now you need to sag off half a step to compensate for the lack of foot speed, and how the game is becoming even more transition oriented. So no, you're not going to be an asset there as far as being swift, but you can fill the lanes really well, and you can speed up your release. That tiny marginal bit to allow you to, fire up those transition threes, and you can work on your footwork and, all the, different types of shots that realistically might come to you in a game environment. So like all these ways I'm listing, Danny Green has not only thought of them, he has worked on those really hard. And I'm sure there are, 80 other things that I have not listed that have contributed to him being like a guy who still looks like he can play useful NBA basketball. Realistically, again, if he's not making shots, there are probably going to be better options, right? But it sure seems to appear that he'll be a worthy, member of the Sixers roster, and that he has bounced back pretty well from what was really dreadful and just a sad injury.
Yeah.
I mean, that night was just so brutal for him, and of course the Sixers, who
just remind me, Embiid fell on his leg.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, Embiid kind of crumpled on Green's leg, and it was both an ACL and an LCL tear, and Green came back a lot sooner than expected. But just with the 9 games last year, of course, fair enough for the Sixers to not be sure exactly what level he's at. But I would say thus far, it seems like he is still at an NBA level, and there's a decent chance he's still in the mix for the Sixers on the wing at 36 years old.
Yes, he is. Let's step away and pay some bills really quick as we get into more of the Sixers Talk podcast after this. But of course, we are brought to you by Wilmington University. Be sure to learn about Wilmington University's personalized academics in a caring community at its open house on Wednesday, October 18th. Details at wilmu.edu/open house. It's time to rush to new rewards at Rivers Casino. Now there's a whole new way for you to earn, redeem, and level up your rewards. Get your new Rush Rewards card and get more out of your game at Rivers Casino Philadelphia. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Back here on the Sixers Talk podcast, live from Rivers Casino. Fall is in the air. Hope you guys are enjoying the ramp up to the Halloween season. Very big around my house. My son's birthday is tomorrow. He'll be 16.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. I'll pass that on to him. And approaching the empty nest at my house to just get these people out of here. But as we move on, it's interesting how young people can have impacts in ways you don't expect. We're watching preseason game number 1. Maybe it's a bit of a sleepy moment. The ball bounces out to Jason Tatum. He decides to try to cock it back and dunk the basketball. But there comes Jaden Springer. It's saying no. I jumped out of my seat, Noah. Jaden Springer, I'm sure that he went to the locker room and replayed that a few times in his head, because he blocks Jaden Springer. He's at the rim. He's one-on-one. It's him, the rim, and Jason Tatum. Like, that's it. And he palmed that thing, all ball. It was no, debate or question that he blocked it. Nothing Tatum could say, couldn't appeal to the refs and say he held him or anything. But man, what an athletic play. And that had to be something that, Bobby Jackson and Rico Hines and all those guys, and particularly Bobby Jackson, I brought that name up because he's a smaller guard during his playing days and was lauded for his defense and activity and quickness and whatnot. And maybe Jaden Springer can glean some stuff from him as far as applying it to his game. But man, what a play. How exciting was that?
He was excited. Yeah, he recalled the night. He said his phone was blowing up.
Was it?
And
yeah,
that just sort of, as the play unfolded, he recognized, oh wow, like Tatum's trying to dunk this. Here we go, and he rose to the occasion.
Didn't know who was on the floor. Got to know the personnel.
Yeah,
Springer prides himself on that type of stuff.
Yeah, and look, I mean, Nick Nurse even brought up in training camp, no, he's not going to be a traditional rim protector at 6'4", but just like his physical tools do suggest, he can be a basket protector for us. And I think that's exactly what it looks like. I mean, I think even beyond that, he's been like the positive story of the Sixers preseason. Wow. As we said, like Maxey, I think fairly expected he'd be, pretty good to very good. And that's been the case. Jaden Springer, like, it was going to be very interesting to see what did the jump shot look like. How many opportunities would Nick Nurse give him? Would he be able to apply effective ball pressure? Would he be able to defend without fouling? Could he just find his way under a new coach? And it's been like A- A stuff for me thus far for him. He's 4 for 5 from 3-point range, so that's excellent. As Nick Nurse said, he's shooting them with confidence, and you can see defensively that it's more than just he cares about doing a good job and he makes a highlight play here and there. He really consistently competes. He gives strong effort. In that Boston game, he had 4 offensive boards. So like you just notice the ways that he's expanding his game, growing more comfortable with who he is and how he can help in the NBA. And yeah, as you said, it's not a super conventional like prototype for him to, try to follow here. He's definitely not a 3-and-D wing, and he's not a conventional ball handler, but
he's got some tools though.
He's got tools, and if he is at a minimum like a respectable, confident jump shooter, then I think the route to NBA minutes looks viable for him, and it looks like it could be here pretty soon. Again, it's kind of hard to parse out whose minutes he might take, but I think Patrick Beverley in theory might play a similar role here, and maybe we do get into a situation where Nurse likes the notion of, Pat Beverley's still going to be part of our rotation, but let's see what Jaden Springer can do initially with 5 or 7 of those minutes. And if he does well, then let's maybe expand the role a bit. So Nurse is juggling all that and definitely doesn't have a settled rotation by any means, but I think just he might have entered this preseason not really expecting Jaden Springer to be part of the NBA rotation picture. And now I think anyone who has watched this has to think, oh yeah, like you got to give Jaden Springer real consideration here. And you've got to be really pleased with how he's developed his game and how he has stepped up, with the chance to impress a new coach.
And I think that is important to note, new coach and under a new regime, because even with the preseason play and the growth, he wouldn't have gotten the same opportunity under Doc Rivers. He's not a very amicable to many younger players. He does lean more toward veterans, whereas I don't think that that's as much of a harbinger under Nick Nurse or a deterrent under Nick Nurse or much something that he will still have opportunities as a younger player that maybe he might not have had under Doc Rivers. But all said, has to be an exciting part of what the Sixers are doing this preseason, seeing him develop and come along and feel himself a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, just I think the jump shot, to me, it's outstanding and rare, like just to change your shot that much for the better in a relatively short period of time. It takes real humility to do that, and it also takes a lot of attention to detail. It's not sufficient to just put up 500 shots or 1,000 shots every day. You have to do that with the correct form, and you have to self-correct when your form isn't the way it's supposed to be. And I mean, you look back at videos of this guy from 12 months ago, and when he's taking threes, the ball's dipping below his knees. Mm-hmm. And now in that Boston game, he takes a corner three, and it's really fluid. It's not a slow release, and it looks like an NBA shot that can go in rather consistently. So I think the progress there is just indicative both of the work ethic and then also the maturity, right? Like many young players trust their shot because it's gotten them to that point. And even if it's not perfect, they're somewhat resistant to change. And that's not Springer in any way. So yes, it's not just all about the jumper, but I think all of the tools that we have talked about just look so much brighter when he is shooting the ball at this level. I mean, 80%, he's not going to stick at that level. Right. But like, you even watch him like scrimmaging with some of the younger guys before the game, and he even stood out in that setting. Like when he got the ball, the shot was smooth and you expected it to go in. And that is just honestly not at all where things were like the middle of last season. So just really incredible development from him. And like obviously he's had many people helping him along the way, but like give him all the credit for first and foremost, like really big time stuff to make strides in that way, and he's put himself like firmly in the conversation, and it was, I think, not looking like that was the probable situation heading into the preseason. Like, to me, he's got to be in the mix for the Sixers, and he'll hope to keep building on a lot of positives.
And when you say in the mix, we're talking about backup 2 minutes. Are we talking about combo guard?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nurse sort of framed it this way. Again, it's amorphous for him as well, but Pat Beverly-ish minutes. Mm-hmm. And obviously Beverly's capable of playing both the 1 and the 2, and is undersized for the 2, but has the physical strength and the tenacity, and Jaden Springer is comparable, arguably. So, I think not a 1 as far as someone who will be running the offense. He's just not capable of that quite yet. I think by and large, he makes solid passing reads and is team-oriented with his decision-making, but he doesn't process the game especially quickly, and he doesn't have an advanced handle. Did have a nice little ISO move on Al Horford that was a highlight last night. But yeah, like he won't be a ball handler for the Sixers, but I think Pat Beverly-ish minutes might not be played by only Pat Beverly to start this season. And that's not to say that Beverly's done anything wrong or that I'm, forecasting that he's going to see a dip in his minutes, but just Nurse seems to have the valid belief that there are guys here who can contribute, and it might not be such a short rotation, and therefore that leads me to think as long as Jaden Springer, stays on a pretty similar trajectory, that we could see him playing meaningful NBA minutes in a way that he hasn't yet. And look, he is only 21 years old, and he turned that age in September. So no guarantee that everything is a smooth ride for him. But I think I agree with your perception that Nurse seems like a coach who will have some willingness for mistakes as long as they're coming from a good place, and who most definitely has become very intrigued with Jaden Springer as a player.
One of the biggest outliers on the Sixers team, the new faces that many fans have questions about, simply because he could be a bench player like Pat Bev or Mo Bamba or PJ Tucker or any of those guys, or he could be a starter, helping replace the scoring and playmaking absent from James Harden, and that's Kelly Oubre. What have we seen from Kelly Oubre? How much has he impressed or hasn't? And is he finding a way to get into the rhythm of what Nick Nurse is trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, the second game was very good. It was a lot better than the first, and Nurse was pretty candid after the first game and saying he named both Oubre and Tobias Harris as players who just got dribbled down and settled for jumpers, and he said he actually took a timeout and said, let's stop doing that. Let's focus on attacking downhill and playing more that way. Mm-hmm. And I think Oubre was largely solid from that point forward. And obviously the second game was fantastic. The efficiency was, the notable knock on him offensively heading in. And he made, I think, his first 6 shots in that game, was filling those lanes well in transition, looking like really athletic, really eager to run alongside Tyrese Maxey. And I think also the defensive activity is starting to pop a little more as well. Just when the Sixers are scrambling around, he's got that wingspan over 7 feet. He's hunting down steals and deflections, which he historically has picked up at a really good rate. And a lot of growing pains for the Sixers on defense, obvious miscommunications and instances where they're not yet adapted to what exactly Nick Nurse wants.
And they're missing an MVP as well. So.
Yeah, right. They don't have that guy cleaning up all the mistakes that they expect to very soon. But second game was very, very strong from Oubre. That said, a lot is just going to hinge on, can he be a better jump shooter than he historically has? He's a 33% career three-point shooter, which is below average, and the volume has generally been very high. The Sixers want him shooting, good looks in transition. They want him to be the beneficiary when, ball handlers are double teamed. But we all know that Nick Nurse won't be thrilled if he just dribbles down the court and, pulls up for an ill-advised shot. And I think it was telling to me that Nurse told us that from game one. So I think that expectation is set with Oubre, and he gave the Sixers a really strong performance in game two. And I think that was, encouraging stuff from him.
Was listening to Nick Nurse pregame yesterday, and definitely not short-winded. Definitely
not usually. Yeah, he likes to share his expertise, and I got a kick out of. There was some question. I think Kyle Neubeck asked it, and he noticed after talking for a minute or two that he hadn't exactly answered it, and he respectfully said, I realized I haven't gotten to your question yet. So I think there's like a professorial element to that where sometimes he just gets so caught up in the basketball and wanting to be the explainer that he just happens to forget and lose his train of thought a little bit. But by and large, he hasn't been snippy or anything thus far. He seems glad to give insight. Albeit, I think when the topic of James Harden is raised, he likes to be a little more straightforward, like he did or didn't practice, he's looked good, and obviously the focus is on the guys who have been active for the Sixers, and James Harden has not yet been one of those guys in games. But yeah, we're all adapting and learning how Nick Nurse is different from Doc Rivers, and I think I would agree he's inclined to be a little more long-winded and detailed and extensive in how he handles us reporters.
We were listening to Nurse's presser before the game yesterday, and our assignment editor, Pat Devlin, was curious because he's like, where is that accent from? Like, it's not Southern, it's not like Eastern necessarily, like Boston or like New York type. So, like, where is the accent from? And the
Carroll, Iowa.
Yeah.
I mean,
and he played with Doug McDermott's dad in college.
Right. He played at Northern Iowa and is, I believe, still the school's all-time leader in three-point percentage.
Had a little stroke, did Nick Nurse?
Oh no, he could shoot that thing. So, that is the origins. Although I guess it's been warped a little by the world traveling nature of his career.
Yeah.
Much of which was in Great Britain. Although I don't think it's like Brett Brown where there's this weird hybrid. I think it's still pretty Iowa through and through. And that is distinct to Nurse.
Yeah, that's awesome. When we talk about that coaching staff, who's rising to the top as far as having players' ear? We know how awesome and much we enjoy the Sam Cassell, Tyrese Maxey, that James Harden, that kind of like triumvirate and them working out together and things like that. What's the relationships like, and who's kind of rising to the top of the coaching ranks as far as having a voice with some of the players and who's connected to who? Yeah,
it's interesting. I mean, Nurse actually acknowledged today that they haven't really settled yet on who is best in what roles in terms of like an offensive specialist or defensive. And he said that's honestly part of what preseason is for. I have a new staff and we need to come to some answers there. He did acknowledge that he likes guys to have a hand in everything to some extent, just so that there's versatility on both the player and the coach side, and everyone just kind of has a feel for what's
some
going on.
Yeah,
but look, I mean, we know Rico Hines like commands respect and is gonna be integral with the player development for Tyrese Maxey and then also for the youngsters like Rico Hines in this little pregame scrimmage I mentioned was very much the conductor out there, and he had his player development crew chipping in with little bits of feedback or what have you, but he was running the show. But yeah, it's been pretty collaborative from what I've seen. The Sixers had this fun little end of practice shooting contest one day where in order to win it, you had to make the most tightly contested shot imaginable. So like you're in the corner.
Who's contesting?
Like everyone. So like 8 assistant coaches and the 4 or 5 other players in the contest. And as Rico Hines detailed clearly to them, the only rule is you can't touch them, but you can you can shout, you can put your hand as close to their eyes as imaginable. And so yeah, I think Nurse likes his staff to have some fun and to do a bunch of stuff together. But yeah, still seeking clarity on if there will be like an offensive specialist or a defensive specialist. I think Nurse is confident in his own abilities on, all parts of the game, but he's still looking to learn like who's going to stand out on his coaching staff and who's going to connect best with different players in different areas of the game. As I talked about when they hired him, like Brian Gates certainly is going to be influential, a guy that Nurse coached under back in the day in the CBA. And like many of these assistants has, G League ties and G League success. But yeah, I am curious when we will get more clarity on like the exact structure of the staff, and that's a storyline I think to follow. It's interesting that you ask about that, because I was wondering where things stood today, and that was Nick Nurse's mini update that they are still settling in and learning exactly where things will stand with the coaching staff. But definitely like a fun vibe at the practices, a lot of energy. They've even so they have a DJ at all the practices now. I think it's like
is it DJ Ghost, like the arena
yes,
guy?
I was worried I'd forget the name.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's like on duty there. He's there all the time, and they play these noises that are not random noises. So there was like a slot machine sound for slot cuts. There was an eagle-ish sound that had something to do with deflections. I guess like
so when someone gets a deflection or makes a slot cut, he plays the sound.
The various corresponding sounds. They mix them up somewhat though, but I think the notion is it's just a entertaining way to like reinforce points of emphasis, and that is an interesting little bit of what Nick Nurse practices entail. And then every practice, we know that it's wrapping up when you hear the Rocky theme song. So that's how they've liked to conclude things. And I think you can't get higher energy than the Rocky theme song. And obviously that's the classic epitome of Philly that this coaching staff seems to enjoy as a way to wrap up the practices.
Nothing wrong with being lauded for good things you do. So if I make a great slot cut and I hear that ching or that slot machine or whatever, I'm like, cool, okay, easy. I think
that's the exact idea. Yeah, the old positive reinforcement, and you're a little more likely to remember that. Ooh, that's something I should try to do again. Mm-hmm. So it's unconventional. A lot of players, when we've asked about it, have been kind of bemused and said, yeah, I've never seen anything like this before. But I think the hope is that like you come into work every day knowing it's not just going to be a grind, it's going to be enjoyable in a sense, and that is one little element of it.
And it's definitely worth noting the whole coaching situation. So much of newness going on here with Nurse in this new situation, the newness of trying to navigate a disgruntled player who is on the precipice of being traded, the newness of the surroundings and everything like that, the newness of not having Adrian Griffin there after years of him being his top assistant, who will play in the opener. So ironically enough, but so he's got to decide which of these guys he most leans toward and trusts and wants to be, that kind of second in command. So I'm sure that is something he's trying to process as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think he leaned on guys that he had pre-existing connections with. And, there are pros and cons to that approach. I think Nurse himself would tell you there's value in, unconventional perspectives that you might not have considered before. But like you go down this list and you've got just a ton of guys who have made their way up here through the G League and cross paths with Nick Nurse somewhere along the way. So that is kind of the general layout of the staff. And they're getting their feet wet, and we will see exactly how Nurse sees fit to structure things.
Any other robust storylines or things we've overlooked here that we want to discuss before next week's pod?
Yeah, I mean, I think Joel Embiid is just so important to this team. We don't want to get ahead of ourselves, because they will play a very different style when he steps onto the court. Nurse, said today he had an awesome day of practice, seems to be in good shape, and is embracing this style of play that is going to involve more ball movement, more cutting, things along those lines. So yeah, for me, I think just the dominant storyline right now is everyone figuring out where they fit in. So Paul Reed, falls into that category as well.
Right.
When
we saw him stretch out to the 3-point line a little bit more these last
a
couple.
bit more,
yeah.
but also a few instances where he was hesitant and where he thought, maybe this guy is, more qualified to shoot the ball than me, and that's not illogical. But some of that gray area is something he's admittedly working through. So yeah, a lot of adapting. And
definitely saw Tobias taking the ball off the glass and pushing it.
Yeah, I think that was encouraging in the first game.
Yeah.
I don't think he played a good home preseason opener. Celtics were doing a lot of switching, and I think Harris is among the players that Nurse wanted to be more attack minded and targeting slower defenders and things along those lines. But yeah, big storyline is Joel Embiid and James Harden, if we're being honest.
Right.
And I guess like a mini storyline that of course we'll have coverage of is blue-white scrimmage is coming up on Saturday in Wilmington, Delaware. So that is free to fans, and that kicks off at noon in Wilmington. So TBD on how revealing that'll be. Definitely in the Brett Brown era, it was pretty competitive and felt like a pretty real, practice-like scrimmage. But I think regardless, if that happens to be accessible to you, it'll be interesting at a minimum to see the new faces and get a sense for just how different the Sixers are under Nurse.
Super cool that when Brett took the blue-white to the Palestra, that would have been fun.
Was that
during the
year,
pandemic?
though? It wasn't during the pandemic. I think there was a weather-related issue that made it not happen. But it was cool in theory.
Right, I remember.
It's something with either rain or humidity,
right.
And the safety understandably came first, so that was disappointing.
It was like moisture on the court, or something like that, right?
Similar to the Kings game that they had to postpone.
Right.
So not a great chapter, but no, I mean, since they've brought it to Wilmington, I think it's been a neat event. And I understand some degree of caution in a likelihood with like guys not going full out and Nurse is not going to show his full playbook. But, I think in the past few years, you have at least seen a decent sense of like, oh, this is what the team is going to look like this year. Here's who, are some of the guys competing for spots. Here's who's impressive. The all-time blue-white standout in its brief history was Matisse Thybulle. He was just like a game wrecker from the first second, had probably 25 deflections. So yeah, the 23-4 Sixers blue-white scrimmage is coming shortly before that third preseason game, and I guess that's something to watch on the horizon.
I don't know what it was about last night's game, but it was a late arriving crowd, man. People were filing in like in the second quarter.
Well, I think there was a baseball team doing good things across the stadium. Very good things.
It was, but I don't know what was going on, but it was a lot going on.
They had the Phils playing actually during the pregame warmups.
On the Jumbotron.
On the Jumbotron, but yeah, obviously once the game started, kind of have to focus on the basketball. I think by that point, the Phillies had
the game was over, right?
8-2 lead.
Bryce Harper had already given a throat slash
multiple times, yeah. So, the focus in the sporting complex was very justifiably the Phillies, and they're kind of look to seal the deal tonight.
Yeah.
So, see how that goes in the latest Red October chapter.
Another great point not to be overlooked. Great time to be a Philly sports fan. The Flyers opener tonight.
Against Torts' old team.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. So a lot going on and just fun to be a part of this Philly sports frivolity. Seems like the center of the world sometimes, but maybe we have more of a grandiose idea about that. But always fun to be a part of what is going on here and to be grateful to have our roles that we do. For Noah Levick, make sure to check out his work on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com. Follow him at Noah Levick on social media. And for my producer, Ben Barry, I'm Danny Pommells. This has been the Sixers Talk Podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. We'll see you next time.